At 56, Phil Mickelson officially banned from setting foot on East Lake property. This isn't clickbait, it's the final door slamming shut on one of golf's greatest careers. A six-time major champion, once the most beloved player on the planet, has been told he cannot even walk through the gates of golf's season-ending crown jewel. And honestly, the pure audacity of it makes my blood boil. Regular golf fans save for years just to walk the grounds at East Lake once in their lifetime. Yet these country club elites treat it like their private backyard. And now Phil Mickelson, the man who won the PGA Championship at 50, the man who made golf fun for millions, can't even get past security. It's a staggering fall from grace that makes you wonder, what did he actually do to get here? But look past the surface outrage. Phil Mickelson's exclusion isn't about one bad day or one wrong move. It's the result of years of decisions, each one pushing him further from the sport that made him a legend. From scandals that made front-page news to choices that alienated everyone who once stood beside him, East Lake is just the final symbol, and the story of how a six-time major champion got banned from the game's biggest stage is more complicated than you think. Let me show you what really happened, and you can decide for yourself if he deserved it. Personally, I think Phil's legacy is one of the most complicated in sports. Do you think he got what he deserved, or is this punishment too harsh? Drop your take below. And if deep dive golf stories are what you came for, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. East Lake isn't just any golf course. It's the spiritual home of Bobby Jones, the greatest amateur the game has ever produced. It sits in the heart of Atlanta, Georgia, and for the last 2 decades, it has hosted the Tour Championship, the season finale where the FedEx Cup champion is crowned. This is where legends come to be tested. Not just any player gets to walk these fairways. You need to earn it. Over an entire season, week after week, tournament after tournament, you need to prove you belong among the top 30 players in the world. Only then do you get the invitation. The energy at East Lake is unlike anything else in golf. The Georgia heat bearing down. The crowds packed tight around every green. The pressure of knowing that one bad swing could cost you millions. And at the end of it all, a $15 million bonus waiting for the man who survives. The history of East Lake runs deeper than most people realize. The course was originally designed by Tom Bendelow in 1908 and later redesigned by the legendary Donald Ross. It's the oldest golf course in Atlanta and one of the most historic in the entire country. Bobby Jones grew up playing there. He learned the game on those fairways. He developed his legendary swing on those practice greens. East Lake isn't just a venue, it's a shrine. When you walk through the gates of East Lake, you're walking through golf history. Every champion who has ever played there has left a piece of themselves on that property. The ghosts of the past are everywhere. The greats who came before, the moments that define generations, the shots that will never be forgotten. Phil Mickelson has felt that pressure. He's walked those fairways, he's heard those roars. In 2002, he stood toe-to-toe with Tiger Woods in one of the most unforgettable duels in Tour Championship history. Back then, Phil was the people's champion, the smiling lefty who played with a swagger that made everyone fall in love with the game. That 2002 tournament was something special. Tiger was in his prime, winning everything in sight. Phil was the challenger, the man who could never quite get past Tiger. But on that weekend in Atlanta, Phil played some of the best golf of his career. He hit shots that defied logic. He made putts that shouldn't have dropped. He showed the world that he could stand toe-to-toe with the greatest player of his generation. The fans were on their feet. The atmosphere was electric. Every shot mattered. Every putt felt like it could change history. And for a brief moment, it looked like Phil might actually pull it off. He didn't win that year. Tiger did. But Phil proved something that weekend. He proved he belonged on the biggest stage. He proved he could handle the pressure. He proved that East Lake was his kind of battlefield. The Phil of 2002 was untouchable. The Phil of today, he can't even get past the security gate. There's no official document that says Phil Mickelson is banned from East Lake property. There doesn't need to be. The exclusion is baked into the rules of the sport itself. And those rules are clear. To play East Lake, you need to qualify. To qualify, you need to be in good standing with the PGA Tour. Phil Mickelson hasn't been that for a long time. But here's the question that haunts every golf fan who remembers what he used to be. How did it come to this? How does a man who won the PGA Championship at 50 years old, the oldest major winner in history, end up banned from the most exclusive event in the sport? The answer isn't one thing. It's a decade of bad decisions, each one worse than the last. The year 2026 was supposed to be different for Phil. After a disastrous 2025 where he barely played, he told people close to him that he was going to focus on his game again. He wanted to prove that at 56, he could still compete. He wanted to show the world that the old Phil wasn't gone. He had a plan. He was going to play a limited schedule, pick his spots, target the tournaments where he knew he could win, use his experience to overcome his age. It was a smart strategy. It was a plan that had worked for other aging champions. But plans don't always survive reality. Then the Farms Golf Club happened. The Farms is an exclusive private club in Rancho Santa Fe, California. It's the kind of place where millionaires go to escape the world, where the membership is so selective that getting in is almost as hard as winning a major. Phil had been a member for years. He belonged there, or so he thought. The Farms isn't just any country club. It's one of the most prestigious in Southern California. The course is immaculate. The facilities are world-class. The membership includes some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in the state. It's the kind of place where your handshake is your bond, your word is your reputation, and your reputation is everything. On a quiet afternoon in the spring of 2026, Phil was on the course. He was playing a casual round, enjoying the California sunshine, probably already thinking about his next tournament. But in the middle of his round, something happened that nobody could have predicted. Club officials walked onto the course. They found Phil, and they told him to leave, right there, in the middle of the round, in front of other members. They asked him to pack up his clubs and get off the property. Imagine that moment. Imagine being Phil Mickelson, six-time major champion, one of the most famous athletes on the planet, and being told to leave a golf course in the middle of a round. Not because of a rules violation, not because of slow play, but because of something much darker. The reason? A female employee at the club had filed a complaint. She accused Phil of non-consensual and inappropriate physical contact. The club launched an independent investigation. They spoke to witnesses, they gathered evidence, and they made a decision that would send shockwaves through the golf world. The investigation was thorough. The club didn't rush to judgment. They took their time. They interviewed everyone involved. They reviewed all available evidence. And when they were done, they reached a conclusion that left no room for doubt. Phil Mickelson's membership at the Farms Golf Club was revoked. His response came quickly. Through his lawyer, Tom Clare, Phil denied the allegations. He called them a product of misinformation. He hired a libel attorney and said that any misunderstanding has been cleared up. But the club didn't change its decision. Phil was out. Getting kicked out of one club is embarrassing. But getting banned from 3 in the same year? That takes something else entirely. Just weeks later, the story got worse. Alan Shipnuck, a veteran golf journalist who had written the definitive book about Phil's LIV golf defection, published a bombshell report in Scratch magazine. His sources? 19 of them. And what they told him painted a disturbing picture. Shipnuck is one of the most respected journalists in golf. He doesn't publish rumors. He doesn't run with unsubstantiated gossip. When he writes a story, it's because he has done the work. He has verified the facts. He has spoken to multiple sources. He has checked and double-checked his information. 19 sources is not a small number. 19 sources means that a lot of people were willing to talk. A lot of people had information. A lot of people wanted the truth to come out. According to Shipnuck's reporting, Phil Mickelson wasn't just unwelcome at the Farms. He was effectively banned from 3 California golf clubs in total. The Farms, the Madison, the Bridges, all of them had made it clear that Phil wasn't welcome on their property. But there was more, much more. The report included an explosive allegation dating back to 2015. According to multiple sources, Phil had shown explicit photos to Pat Perez's ex-wife, Ashley Perez. He had made inappropriate advances toward her. And this wasn't just a rumor. Shipnuck's sources were adamant about what they had seen and heard. Pat Perez, for those who don't know, is a fellow PGA Tour player. He and Phil were never close friends, but they were colleagues in the same small world of professional golf. And now, a decade later, this story was coming out. Phil's team responded aggressively. They called the report an ambush attack from anonymous sources. They insisted that Phil had never been thrown out of any golf club and that any decisions to leave were his own. But the clubs didn't see it that way. And 19 sources don't all lie. The Madison and the Bridges had their own reasons for not wanting Phil on their property. Sources told Shipnuck that Phil's behavior at those clubs had been problematic for years, that he had made staff uncomfortable, that he had crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed, that the clubs had simply had enough. But even as these allegations were breaking, the most alarming part of Phil's 2026 was already happening in plain sight. He simply stopped showing up to tournaments. The 2026 season started like any other for most players. The majors were coming. The U.S. Open was at Shinnecock Hills. The Open Championship was at St. Andrews. For a player like Phil Mickelson, these are the events that define a career. Phil played exactly one LIV golf event in 2026. It was in South Africa. He finished tied for 48th. After that, he disappeared. No Masters, no PGA Championship, no U.S. Open, no Open Championship. For the first time in his professional career, Phil Mickelson missed every single major in a calendar year. Think about that for a moment. Phil Mickelson had played in majors for over 30 years. He had never missed a single one. Not when he was injured, not when he was struggling, not when he was going through personal problems. He always showed up. He always competed. He always gave it his best shot. But 2026 was different. The official explanation was family health issues. And sure, that's possible. Everyone has family challenges, but if that was the real reason, why did he play that one event in South Africa? Why not just skip the whole year? Something didn't add up. Meanwhile, LIV Golf continued without him. The league he helped build was marching forward, but Phil was being left behind. The South Africa event was telling. Phil didn't look like himself. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking with the crowd. He wasn't playing with his usual swagger. He looked like a man going through the motions. A man who had lost his fire. A man who was just showing up because he had to. At the end of the 2026 LIV golf season, the league announced its relegation list. 12 players were being demoted. Phil Mickelson was one of them. The captain of High Flyers GC, the team he led, was being sent down. At 56 years old, Phil Mickelson had gone from being the face of a rebel league to being cast out of it. Missing every major at 56 is one thing. But the story of how Phil got to this point didn't start in 2026. It started almost a decade earlier, and every bad decision made the next one inevitable. Let's go back to 2016. Phil Mickelson was still one of the biggest names in golf. He was winning tournaments. He was making millions. He was beloved by fans. But behind the scenes, something was happening. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, launched an investigation. They accused Phil of receiving inside information from a sports gambler named Billy Walters. The tip was about a stock called Dean Foods. Walters allegedly told Phil to buy shares, and Phil bought them. Then the stock went up, and Phil made over $1 million. Billy Walters was known as one of the most successful sports gamblers in America. He had a reputation for being sharp, for having sources, for knowing things that other people didn't. And according to the SEC, he had shared that knowledge with Phil. Phil was listed as a relief defendant in the case. That meant he wasn't being criminally prosecuted, but he was still forced to pay back the money. Billy Walters went to federal prison for 5 years. Phil walked away with his freedom, but with a stain on his reputation that would never fully wash off. The case damaged Phil's image in ways that people don't always remember. He was no longer just the smiling lefty. He was the guy who got caught up in a scandal, the guy who made bad choices, the guy who hung out with gamblers and insiders. Then came 2021. The Detroit News published a story linking Phil to an alleged mob bookie named Dandy Don DeSerrano. According to the report, Phil had a gambling relationship with DeSerrano and was defrauded of $500,000. Phil called the story extremely speculative, self-serving, and irresponsible. But the association was out there, and it didn't go away. The gambling ties were a red flag for many fans. Golf is supposed to be about integrity, about honesty, about doing the right thing even when nobody is watching. And Phil's associations with gamblers and gamblers made people question his judgment. Then came the big one, 2022, LIV Golf. Phil Mickelson helped build LIV Golf from the ground up. He recruited players, he lent his name and reputation to the upstart league. He was the face of the rebellion against the PGA Tour, and in the process, he made enemies. The PGA Tour establishment didn't forget what he did. They didn't forgive him. They saw him as a traitor, as someone who had turned his back on the organization that had made him wealthy and famous, as someone who had chosen money over loyalty. But here's the thing that people forget. In Alan Shipnuck's book, Phil famously called the Saudis who fund LIV, scary motherfiff. He knew exactly what he was getting into. He knew the moral compromises he was making, and he did it anyway. When the PGA Tour suspended Phil for joining LIV, he didn't fight it. He didn't apologize. He didn't try to find a middle ground. He just walked away. The bridge was burned, and once a bridge is burned, it's very hard to rebuild. But here's the question everyone is asking. Was there actually a formal ban from East Lake, or is the situation even worse than that? Let me be clear about what banned from East Lake actually means. There is no piece of paper that says Phil Mickelson cannot enter East Lake Golf Club. There is no security notice posted at the gate. There is no official document from the PGA Tour or the club itself that singles Phil out by name. But here's the reality. To play East Lake, you have to qualify for the Tour Championship. To qualify for the Tour Championship, you have to be in the top 30 of the FedEx Cup standings. To be in the top 30, you have to play PGA Tour events all season long. Phil Mickelson has been suspended from the PGA Tour since 2022. He can't play PGA Tour events. He can't earn FedEx Cup points. He can't qualify for the Tour Championship. He can't even enter the tournament. So is Phil banned from East Lake? Technically, no. Practically, yes. He can't get in because the system itself has shut him out. It's not a ban. It's a consequence. A consequence of every decision he made over the last decade. A consequence of the bridges he burned. A consequence of the reputation he destroyed. Which brings us to the hardest question of all. Is there any way back? Or is East Lake the final chapter? Let's look at the path forward. If Phil wanted to return to the PGA Tour, he would need to serve a full suspension. He would need to pay substantial fines. He would need to apologize, publicly and sincerely. And even then, there's no guarantee the tour would take him back. The process would be brutal. He would have to face the media. He would have to answer questions about his past. He would have to explain his decisions. He would have to convince people that he had changed. If he wanted to play on the PGA Tour Champions, the 50 and over tour, he would face the same obstacles. The Champions Tour is run by the same organization. The same rules apply. The same suspension stands. And what about LIV Golf? The league he helped build? He's been relegated. His team has moved on. And with rumors that the Saudi Public Investment Fund might end its support for LIV after 2026, the entire league could be in jeopardy. If LIV disappears, Phil has nowhere to go. One golf journalist described Phil's situation this way. He is a man without a country. That's what makes this so sad. Phil Mickelson isn't just banned from East Lake. He's been banned from golf itself. Not officially, not on paper, but in every way that matters. The game that made him a legend doesn't want him anymore. The fans who once cheered for him are divided. The players who once respected him have moved on. And the man himself, he's out of options. Think about what Phil Mickelson used to be. He was the most exciting player in golf. The guy who would hit a shot that nobody else would even attempt. The guy who would smile and joke with the crowd while everyone else was grinding. The guy who won the PGA Championship at 50 years old and made us believe that anything was possible. That Phil is gone. What's left is a cautionary tale, a warning about what happens when talent isn't enough, when charisma isn't enough, when you make decisions that alienate everyone around you, when you burn so many bridges that there's nowhere left to go. East Lake isn't just a golf course. It's a symbol. It's the place where the best players in the world gather to crown a champion. It's the place where legends are celebrated. It's the place that Phil Mickelson will never set foot on again. And that's not a punishment handed down by a single person. It's the result of a man who had everything: talent, fame, fortune, love from millions of fans, and threw it all away. One bad decision at a time. One burned bridge at a time. One decade at a time. So when you hear that Phil Mickelson is banned from East Lake, don't think of it as a one-time event. Think of it as the final chapter in a story that has been writing itself for 10 years. The story of a man who had the world at his feet, and chose to walk away from it. At 56, Phil Mickelson is officially banned from setting foot on East Lake property. Not because of one bad day, not because of one wrong move, but because of a decade of choices that finally caught up with him. The gates of East Lake will stay closed, and Phil Mickelson will have to live with that for the rest of his life.